Hello, dear viewers, and welcome to another episode of Daily Reset right here at your favorite family channel, KTV2. And today we have a very interesting topic to talk about. But before that, how about we go take a quick break and we'll be right back right after this. And we're going to introduce you to our guest. So see you soon. Hello, dear viewers, and we're back again after that short break. And today we have a very special guest. His name is Dr. Sayed Hamza. And he is going to talk to us about the hidden toxin, and that is about today's subject. But how about we take a further look into who he is and tell us a little bit more about himself. And hello and welcome to the show, Doctor.
Hello, it's fantastic to be here.
Could you tell our audiences about who you are and what you work?
Yes, so I'm Sayed Hamza. I'm a medical doctor. I specialize in public health, and I am a recent recipient of a PhD in environmental and occupational health sciences, which is one of the divisions of public health.
Amazing. Such a long name, but it is amazing nonetheless. So when we're talking about hidden toxins, what do you mean by hidden, and what toxins are we talking about?
So when we talk about hidden toxins, hidden can be divided into two things. One is people's lack of knowledge that they exist around them, and the other part could be the fact that sometimes they're not disclosed in products, whether in the ingredient list or in the manufacturing process that exposes us to them.
All right. So where are the common sources of these hidden toxins usually?
So we're exposed to toxins all around us. Everything around us is a chemical, and chemicals have different degrees of hazardousness to human health. We're exposed to them at different frequencies and in different concentrations. So that really is what makes a toxin a toxin. It's the dose, the frequency that we're exposed to that toxin. Some of the places that we're exposed to toxins is everywhere around us, whether it's in the air in the form of air pollution, whether it's in the water as water contamination, in the food, in food packaging, in personal care products, cleaning products at home. It's all around us, and our lack of knowledge is definitely our weakness.
And when do we actually, when you say that it's basically all around us, whether it's pollution of the water or the air or even the substances that we use for the cleaning products. So when do we know that, I know that when I go and buy a cleaning product for, let's say, for cleaning the floor, I know it has chemical substances, but why is it on the shelf? How come I can buy this chemical and if it does have any further harms within the future?
Well, there are two issues here. Number one is innovation is always faster than regulation.
Sure.
And so when a company comes up with through its research and development, decides that this chemical is quite effective in achieving the aims of this product, they'll go ahead and add it. If we think about, let's say, the FDA in the United States, they allow companies to self-regulate, and with the understanding that if people have concerns, if things happen to people's health, you will be investigated. And so a lot of the time we're introduced to chemicals. They find themselves, in our homes, and they stay there for 20 years before anybody realizes, hey, this is making us sick. And so an example would be, fragrances, for example. They're all around us. Some fragrances are fine, some aren't. And when we buy a cleaning product, we don't realize maybe that a fragrance is also an active chemical and it affects our health. Some chemicals aren't very widely studied. Some chemicals aren't raising any alarm bells because they're not typical chemicals in that they don't follow a typical dose response effect in people. And so there are many different reasons why we find these products on shelves. Some agencies haven't recognized their risk. An example would be gel nail polish that was recently banned in the European Union, and so other countries now are using those studies to develop their own regulations towards that chemical. That chemical has been widely used for decades, and nobody said a thing.
Yeah.
But after concerns and specific studies that are considered standard for achieving and, let's say, displaying or exhibiting certain health effects in animals, for example, they can gather that, evidence and provide it to the regulatory agencies, and they end up, banning it in products. So they're not on shelves anymore.
All right. Some products that we use, we don't actually realize that it is harmful for us. And why is that?
Well, it's a two-pronged thing. So one is a lack of knowledge or a lack of recognition. It's some chemicals are like miracle, chemicals, as in they do the job like nothing else. An example would be like phthalates, right? We produce, by 2025, I believe that we produce around 8 million tons a year because it is such an effective chemical. You add it to a fragrance, it works as a solvent, as a homogenizer, it works as a preservative. When you spray a fragrance with a phthalate on your skin or on your clothes, it creates a film that makes it last longer and smell stronger. And so how am I going to convince, companies that want to use fragrances not to use phthalates when it does such a good job, and the next, alternative to it doesn't do half as good a job? We've become a culture. I mean, not become, but I think throughout history, we as humans, appreciate scent, we appreciate fragrance, we want to smell nice, we want the places that we stay in to smell nice. And so phthalates are incredibly effective, but at the same time, they're incredibly detrimental to our health.
Detrimental, which sense?
So phthalates they affect our hormones. They don't follow a monotonic dose response effect, which means that even at very, very low doses, they can affect our bodies. I think maybe I'll get into this a little bit more later, but they can cause changes in our DNA, reversible changes. That's something that I really want to emphasize because I don't want to strike fear into people's hearts. This is really about raising awareness and telling people that there is another way, and that whatever harm you imagine has happened to you or your loved ones, you still have time to reverse it.
All right. So what are the small daily steps or things that we do on a daily basis that increases our exposure to, toxins?
Okay, so using fragranced products, the alternative is to use products that use natural essential oils or terpenes in acceptable doses. Terpenes being chemicals that are chemically mimicking natural sources. So sometimes when you grab the ingredient list, you see things like linalool or geraniol or lavendul and alpha pinene. And a lot of these chemicals are available in natural sources. Like pinene comes from pine trees, and geraniol comes from flowers, and linalool is present in lavender flowers and gives that fresh scent. And so at certain doses, these chemicals are perfectly fine to use, but them with fragrance, at high doses, especially for these terpenes, can be harmful to health. Another thing that we find toxins in and that exposes us to some risk is food packaging. A lot of food packaging has plastic in it. We use a lot of cling film, like the plastic wrap. We are exposed to a lot of different chemicals from food and personal care products, if I'm gonna kind of generalize.
Yeah. All right. How about we take a quick break and we'll continue our topic right after this, okay? All right, dear viewers, we'll take a quick break, so don't go away. Stay tuned because we have a lot to talk. Hello, dear viewers, and we're back again right here at Daily Reset, and today's topic is hidden toxins with Dr. Hamad. So, could you tell us now about the toxins and how it builds up in our body over time, and the detrimental, problematic things that could, happen to us?
So, some chemicals have a very long half-life. What that means is that it takes a very long time for half of the chemical that entered our body to leave.
Okay.
And so when we're exposed to it repeatedly, over days, weeks, months, it ends up building up in our body because our detoxification mechanisms are overwhelmed and there's too much of it to get rid of it completely. And so what happens is the levels build up in our body. But there are other ways where chemicals can harm our health, which is epigenetic changes, where some chemicals, after we're exposed to them, recode our genes by going all the way into the nuclei and causing a change in protein synthesis, which tells the cells in our body to do a different job. And that epigenetic change can last, from 2 months to forever. Like we've observed them in mice changing their colors. And so there are different mechanisms through which toxins affect our bodies. Like most people think, oh, a toxin is something I take now and die in like 10 minutes, but a lot of these take quite a long time to harm our health.
Okay, talking again about harm, then how does it affect our health in terms of mood, energy, and long-term health?
So some chemicals can affect the hormone system. The hormone system is in charge of determining a lot of things, whether it's our energy levels, our mood, our happiness. They can determine our function, the function of our organs, whether it's like sexual function, thyroid function, metabolism, can be very much affected. Other toxins deposit in the brain, causing, and sometimes in non-specific regions, but cause very much measurable effects that we notice and that are long-term. An example would be, certain heavy metals causing tremors and memory loss and behavioral issues in people. And so these are some of the ways that they can affect us.
All right. Yeah. So a question would be like, do elderly and children get more affected with toxins more than let's say people that are in their 20s, 30s, or 40s?
Yes, and the reason for this is two things. The first thing is that, let's say in children, their gut, so their gastrointestinal tract, is more leaky of materials. Not leaky is not the right term. They absorb more.
Okay.
So because they have an immature GI tract, they can absorb more of the chemical. And so a nice example here would be lead, where in children, they absorb around 40 to 70% of the lead that goes into their body. And because they're smaller in size, it has a more profound effect on their bodies.
Yeah.
Whereas in adults, lead is only absorbed up to 30%, up to 30 to 40%. And so, and that's in healthy adults. And then another thing is that in children and in the elderly, we have issues with the immune system. So children have immature immune systems, and sometimes the elderly have exhausted immune systems. And another thing is with the elderly, they could have chronic diseases that predispose them to even more profound effects after they're exposed to a chemical.
And because how come like people like when they're in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, they're kind of a bit more their body's more defensive in this? Is it because we do have a higher immune system, or is it because like our hormones are more still effective in some way?
So physical maturity comes with an assumed mature immune system. We've been exposed to certain things, but we're still strong. Let's say life hasn't taken its toll on our bodies yet. You asked earlier about chemicals building up in our bodies. So sometimes while some chemicals are building up in our body is able to kind of fight the effects. But by the time we reach 60 or 70 years, sometimes we're overwhelmed. Our bodies are tired, like an old warrior who's been to 50 battles and is just tired.
And that buildup can actually tire our immune system, because once we deteriorate, when we grow older in our 50s and 60s, and everything in us starts to deteriorate, it starts to take a toll on us.
Exactly.
But there are other things that actually can build up and stay there, and then still also have an effect on us.
Yes.
So it's like a two-way street.
It is, yes.
Okay. So so how do our lifestyle, like diet or cleaning routines, make a difference?
Okay, so with regards to cleaning routines, let me just share something. At home, for example, I fill a spray bottle with water. I add some citric acid, and some white vinegar. It's, not too much so that it smells like white vinegar.
Okay.
And I use that to clean everything. I think we have an issue with over sanitization we over sanitize, and I blame COVID for this, but not everything needs to be sanitized. And in fact,
I think that's it. Plus also marketing where they keep on telling you it kills 99%.
absolutely, absolutely. And so that's the completely wrong thought, especially for people who have children at home, because we need to be exposed to chemicals so that we can build up an immune reaction to these things. If we over sanitize, we look at studies, and they over sanitization is associated with atopic disease, so like asthma and eczema, and a weaker immune system. So a study looked at Amish people in America, and there are people who live in like the old style, horses, and everything is wooden and stuff like that. And believe it or not, their children are significantly healthier and have a much stronger immune system because they're around animals and dust and dirt, and they don't sanitize anything. And that helps them build an immune system.
Even people that basically live on the countryside or up in the mountains, they have that simple kind of lifestyle, but it's not simple, but it is essential. It's an essential lifestyle.
Exactly.
Eating things that are basic makes you actually stronger.
Exactly. And so our defense mechanisms in the body, all the enzymatic processes, hormones, require certain building blocks to help them, stay strong. So some of those are essential, nutrients like metals. For example, magnesium and iron are super important for the body. I mean, magnesium and iron together cover maybe 500 different, enzymatic or different processes in the body. And without good enough levels of them, we suffer, our body doesn't perform as well. Another thing is that having these, appropriate levels of essential metals can help decrease the risk of toxic metals. And so a wholesome diet, is very important. We need, for hormones, for example, for hormone synthesis, we need good oils. So whether that comes from avocados or olive oil or, any natural source that we've used for millennia, these are all absolutely essential for producing these hormones and for, supporting the body to do its natural tasks.
Oh, I got you. All right, so what does research tell us about connection between pollution and chronic diseases? Yeah.
So chronic pollution can cause chronic diseases. And so a person working in a shisha cafe exposed to high levels of smoke for 15 to 20 years can develop lung disease that is chronic. And exposure to, let's say, particulate matter 2.5, which is very small, pollution particles, for 6 weeks in a row can increase the thickness of the carotid artery that supplies the brain with oxygen and predispose a person to strokes in the future.
Oh, all right. Okay, how about we take another break since the conversation is getting even more interesting, and we'll be right back after this. All right, dear viewers, we'll take another quick break and we'll be back for more, so don't go away. All right, dear viewers, and we're still here and talking about the hidden toxins, and let's continue our topic. So what are the steps that we can take at home to limit our exposure to these kind of toxins?
So to limit or to decrease, let me try to go one by one. So for air quality, which is super important, you see, in the Middle East, we spend a lot of time indoors. You have the 8 hours that you're sleeping at night, but you also have, we work indoors, and we try to avoid the heat, especially during the hot summer months. And so indoor air quality is essential. It's very important. Some things we can do and some things we can't really do. So let's talk about the things that we can do, which is, an example is an air purifier. I noticed here in the studio you have one.
Yeah.
I have one in my living room and I have one in my bedroom. And the reason is because an air purifier that has a HEPA filter and an activated charcoal filter together will filter out most of the toxins that we're exposed to.
Right.
So it's not just about now, bringing down the levels of air pollution, whether indoors or outdoors, because we can't really, control outdoor air. We can control indoor air, but we also need to stop emitting things and putting things in the indoor air, whether it's, a scented candle or, let's say, incense, bukhur, for example. Furniture is another source, but, that's one of the things that we can't control, but we can mitigate. We can use air purifiers to help. So, anything that has wood is a natural material. It needs to be preserved so that it doesn't change, it doesn't shrink, it doesn't grow mold. And so for that, they use formaldehyde and formaldehyde releasing chemicals. And formaldehyde is a possible carcinogen. A lot of people get very sick from being exposed to it. In Hurricane Katrina, people were put into mobile homes to, provide them relief from losing their homes to the hurricane. And a lot of people got sick from staying in those mobile homes because they used wood that was releasing very high levels of formaldehyde. Another thing would be polyurethane and other types of foam, which is the backbone of a furniture piece is comfort. You need comfort.
Yes.
And for that you need cushions, and cushions are made of foam usually. And these foams can off-gas chemicals, especially VOCs, into the environment. And using air purifiers really helps.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
So that's in the sense of air, but what are other things like, let's say, things that we use on a daily basis, like cleaning products or food? And
so sometimes less is better. So don't use air fresheners. Don't use bukhur on like incense on a daily basis. Make it something for, occasions.
Mhm.
Don't use fragrance products like shampoos, serums, soaps. All these have fragrances in them.
Okay.
Sometimes you'll find fragrance-free options or options where they've been fragranced with natural essential oils, and that's the much healthier alternative. For food packaging, for example, if you opened up my fridge at home, you'd find that everything is in glass Tupperware.
Yeah.
You could also use stainless steel Tupperware. Cooking in pots and pans that are not non-stick, unless you know that the non-stick coating is free of PFAs
Yeah.
and heavy metals. For example, avoiding aluminum in pots and pans is another way to avoid metals, because
How come?
well, aluminum in itself can build up in the body, and it's been associated with Alzheimer's disease. It also acts as a metalloestrogen, where it mimics estrogen in the body, which can also have another effect on the body. An example would be, like how there was a lot of talk about how deodorants expose us to aluminum, which gives people cancer. The problem is not aluminum. Aluminum doesn't cross the skin that way. It's the fragrance in the deodorant.
When they start to, they alcoholize it, make it more easier for the body to get in, basically.
So metals can be absorbed by the skin if they're added in solvents. Absolutely. But they're still, like, you would absorb around 1% or 0.3% of.
But when you do it on a daily basis.
Good point. The body can detoxify 0.3% of the aluminum that comes through the skin. But when we cook in aluminum pots and then we eat, that we're taking a lot more aluminum in, and it's in a form that is easily absorbed in the GI tract. And so people don't think about this, but when you're eating from, I like to cook at home a lot because of two things. Number one, I don't know what kind of pots and pans a restaurant would be using. And another thing is the takeaway containers, they're plastic. And a lot of this plastic, number one, it could release microplastic, but at the same time, it can reduce phthalates or bisphenols, which are both endocrine disrupting chemicals. And the reason they release them is because these chemicals aren't chemically bound to the plastic. They're inserted into the matrix to make the plastic either softer or harder. Okay. And so putting something that's hot into, let's say, a BPA container, a bisphenol container, can increase the leaching or the release of this chemical into the food by 55 times, 55 orders of magnitude. And so, I tell people, even if, let's say, I'm very practical with people, and I'm not trying to scare people. I'm trying to help people.
It's just a
decrease their risk.
Exactly. They have to take the first steps, and then they'll start to ask on their own.
So I'm not saying don't order from restaurants. I'm saying try not to reheat the food in the plastic. Okay. When you get the food, try to put it in a normal plate, or a glass Tupperware. Exactly. And then microwave it, because you reduce your risk by a significant amount if you do that.
You said something about putting your food in a glass container in the fridge or a stainless steel. Mm-hmm. Why stainless steel? And you were talking about aluminum at one point.
So stainless steel, you have different degrees of stainless steel. You have 304, 306, 36, up to 316 is used. And so we call them food grade stainless steel or medical grade stainless steel. Steel is a alloy, which means you take different metals and put them together. So you take iron, carbon, and then you add certain other metals for their beneficial effects. So the chromium that you could add can give the stainless property to the steel. And so in the percentages that these chemicals and in the bioavailable forms of these metals in the steel, they're not very reactive to food. And even if they do react with the food, we don't absorb them. An example would be like lead. You have lead acetate, lead chromate, lead oxide. They're different lead molecules. So we can't just think of metals as, like something that we bang on,
Yeah, very true.
They are chemicals as well, and they can exist in powdered form, in liquid form, in many different forms. And so the form in which they are in stainless steel is relatively non-reactive and safe.
Okay, got you. What advice would you give our dear viewers to kind of, take their first steps into living a better life? If you have to like put it all in, sum it up in one discussion.
You need air purifiers at home, and I know I didn't talk enough about why we need air purifiers at home, but trust me on this. One of the reasons, just very quickly, is you need ventilation sometimes. And Kuwait doesn't have the worst outdoor air quality. These days, in fact, I have an outdoor air quality measuring device. I have something that tells me what the air pollution is at, and it's quite low in the winter time. I noticed starting late October, and this is something we also observe in scientific studies, that we have a relief from pollution from around like November to almost May or June.
Yeah.
And so the weather like outside is relatively clean, in some areas more than others. And so,
but after March, that's where the heat
starts coming in, that's when the pollution levels seem to go up.
And that's because of the winds that keep carrying.
It's so 40 around. It's more than 50% of our pollution is actually dust.
Okay.
So we're not a horribly polluted country. There are other countries in the region that have way higher pollution levels, and so. Air quality, that's the first thing. You need to turn over the air that you have at home. Whenever you're cooking, turn on the hood ventilation, so that you can take out, especially if you have a gas cooker, because even when the gas cookers are off, sometimes they leak a little bit. That's what a study found in the United States. And sometimes when we're cooking, the oil starts to evaporate or even smoke up.
That's where they stick on the ventilation.
Exactly. And so that's why we need that hood to be on at all, as much as possible when you're cooking. Avoid synthetically fragranced products. Avoid products where there's no determination of what the fragrance molecules are. If it says fragrance, aroma, scent, flavor, these aren't chemicals. These are codes where companies are allowed to put undisclosed chemicals in, and especially if the fragrance is higher up in the list. So in the ingredient lists, the way the FDA says is the more the weight of this chemical in your product, the higher up the list it has to be. And so you want fragrance to be the very last chemical, and if you can avoid it altogether and go with something that has essential oils, that's significantly better. With regards to cleaning products as well, there are studies that compared using cleaning products daily to smoking a pack of cigarette a day. Now, I don't know how valid that study is, but it's confirming, what other studies are saying, which is that a lot of the chemicals that they use in these cleaning products can be harmful. Don't over sanitize, not everything needs to be, squeaky clean. Exactly, And so these are the main things I can say. Try to avoid, food and plastic.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, Doctor. We really enjoyed our episode right here today and talking about hidden toxins. We hope to, have you again right here on the show. It's been a delight.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Anytime. All right, dear viewers, thank you so much for being with us right here at Daily Reset, where a new life and chapter starts right here. Thank you so much. Till next time, see you soon.